Hello everyone, welcome to the ICSAN Rivers Chapter-Career Navigation series. This series will feature Chartered Secretaries and Administrators who will be sharing their career experiences, achievements, challenges, and personal insights in their professional journey. Expect to be inspired by these outstanding men and women who will give you pointers and mentoring that will help you as you journey along in your own career as a chartered secretary. Happy watching.
Good morning, Mr. Nohan. Good morning to all our ICSAN members in Rivers State Chapter and indeed the entire body of ICSAN members across the country and in diaspora.
You are welcome to the ICSAN Rivers State Chapter-Career Navigation interview series. We are glad to have you. We know that we know you, but for the purpose of this interview, you will tell us your name, your workplace, and your current work position.
Once again, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on this very important initiative of the ICSAN Rivers State Chapter. My name is Uto Ukpanah. I serve as the Chief Governance Officer because that's the role of the Company Secretary of MTN Nigeria PLC. I also provide governance advisory across all the MTN subsidiaries as well. I'm a lawyer, so I'm a legal practitioner. I attended what was then known as the University of Cross River State, now University of Uyo. That's where I got my LLB. I later went to the Nigerian Law School. I was called to the Nigerian Bar in 1990. And thereafter, I went into practice. I've been in financial services. I've been, before coming into telecoms. So across practice as well. And I'm also a certified ethics officer. I did a program with the University of Stellenbosch and the Ethics Institute, all in South Africa. I'm also a member of the Institute, proudly so, of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. I sit on the council. I'm a fellow of the Institute. I always name the Institute first because that's the professional body that I most align with. I'm also a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, of course, by my occupation as a legal practitioner. And I'm also a member of the International Bar Association, the Ethics and Compliance Officers Association of America as well. And I also, there are other things that I do. I sit on the board of a few entities as well. I currently have just become chair of the board of trustees of Obong University, amongst others. And I have interest that also spread into agriculture. It's a new area. Just speaking at MTN, I also oversee ESG. That's the environment, social, and governance aspects of our business as well.
Wow, that's loaded. That's loaded. Congrats for attaining that level and much more that is on the way. But you mentioned that you are currently a member of Council of ICSAN. That also shows your pedigree in the profession of Chartered Secretaries. Let me begin to ask, was it your desire from inception to be a Chartered Secretary as a professional, or like some of us, by happenstance, we all of a sudden, whatever, you jumped into it and then start making a blossoming career out of it? How did yours start?
Well, interestingly, if I wind back the hand of the clock to when I was young, I actually wanted to be a forensic investigator.
Wow.
And so, unlike most children who demand for toys, I spent my allowance on buying magazines that those my age will remember True Detective. So I would spend my money, I would only love gifts that had some element of forensic in it. So I love Nancy Drew. My early years were spent in the US. So Nancy Drew is a popular young lady investigator. So, and I always love to watch programs on sort of true crime. And I would try to figure out what's going on in the head of a serial killer, or why would this person do this? And so those things interested me. I was a science student at school, but I was very prolific. And I guess this came from reading a lot as as a teenager. I spent my money on books, irrespective, it didn't matter what the book was about. I just read. And so I believe that helped to improve my vocabulary. And so when I entered, I actually applied for architecture at school or pharmacy. I actually got admission into architecture and pharmacy in 2 US universities. And then top chance, a lecturer convinced me that no, your powerful use and influential use of words, you should read law. That's how I actually started thinking about reading law in the first place.
Okay.
And he convinced me to apply to read law, and I got into the law faculty. So fast forward, when I came out of school, started my career, I went into practice, but there was something about corporate and company law that attracted me. So I took a decision that, oh, this is where I want to focus on, this aspect of the law. And CAMA 1990 had just come out then. And so we did it in law school because that was the year I was called, interestingly. And then when I came out, while I was still in one of the big 3 banks at the time, I attended a lecture, a program put together by ICSAN, and as part of my development for that year. And that's where my interest in the Institute started. And I realized that, wow, this Institute actually represents the area, my profession. And so I will focus. I was not a member, I just attended a training program. And so I came back to the office and I told my boss, I said, we need to sponsor the activities of this institute going forward. This was probably 99 or thereabouts, or year 2000, I'm not too sure. And so we started sponsoring activities. I became more involved. I was still not a member. I didn't become a member until about 2007 or thereabouts. And then I met the then registrar, Mr. Togunde. I met people like the pioneer chairman of the Akwa Ibom State chapter, Andy. He worked at the Institute then. And they were very instrumental in convincing me to become a member of the Institute. And, you know, the rest is history.
Wow. I also know that your story is similar to most of us. We found out that it's at the later stage in your university or the law school that this idea of Chartered Secretary, whether UK or Nigeria, comes up and all that. But looking at what you said, did you really have this teaching stage in company secretaryship? Because at the level you joined, you're already big in the system per se. So I want to know, what about your early career entry days as a chartered secretary? What are the things you met at that level, and how were you able to navigate them to the level of stability that we are seeing now? as a chartered secretary.
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly, it was becoming a chartered secretary that actually helped me rise through the ranks. Believe it or not, I was an officer in the bank. I started from the bottom. So I was an officer and I was sent to the company secretariat along the way. I was hired for legal company secretariat. And for those, some might know this was at UBA because I worked at UBA for a number of years. And my boss then was the second professor of law in the country, so very knowledgeable and was instrumental to actually pushing me. And supporting me through the rise, through my career navigation. Becoming a chartered secretary added to the knowledge and skills that I required. So for instance, really understanding financial statements, which as a lawyer, this is not part of what you're really the focus of your professional grooming.
Yes.
But as a chartered secretary, prepares you for corporate governance, prepares you for administration, prepares you for the financial aspects of your role, and gives you a 360 and holistic grooming. So this is how being a chartered secretary helped me navigate rising from where I was, entry level, and rising through the ranks. One area that really caught my interest was corporate governance, because, and again, my boss simply, if you recall, for those who know how corporate governance has evolved in Nigeria, it started more in financial services. There was a lot more focus there. And I happened to serve as the secretary to the Bankers Committee that did the first corporate governance efforts in the financial services, which later translated to what we know now as the Code of Corporate Governance that CBN came up with.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting to know. You mentioned the prof, said is the second among the foremost. That means along the line, you must have people you look onto, like mentors who may have helped you to mold who you are today in the area of corporate governance, even as you move forward in your area of specialization of corporate governance, legal and regulatory profession. Who are those people that inspired you, or the resources? I know you mentioned one prof now, and then your office is another. Can you tell us the people that aided you, kind of mentor, in getting to where you are now and the successes you have achieved so far?
Thank you very much. At the time I started my career, the concept of mentorship wasn't a prevalent support system. So you literally had to navigate on your own blindly. And but I believe number one, I had very good parents that grounded me, and education has been very, very important in my family. So beginning from those early days, you recall I told you I love books, and they allowed me to explore the opportunities that I wanted to, and supported me through. Also, I have a very supportive spouse. For women in the workplace, and I'm speaking about this because sometimes family life can become a limitation. And so I have a very supportive spouse. Shout out to my husband, Mr. Uto Ukpanah, who's also a lawyer.
Okay.
And also to my bosses along the way. The lady I mentioned, Professor Isabella Okabwe, she actually gave me the nudge into corporate governance. I knew absolutely nothing about the space when she pushed me into it. But she gave me one advice. She said, where you need guidance, don't hesitate to come to me. This was a relatively new area And I'm speaking about 2001, 2002, when very few people had heard, probably in the UK and more exposed jurisdictions. And, Google wasn't readily available because automation was just new. So she was one person who was very key and fundamental in introducing me. Like I said, she gave me a nudge into that space. And the more I got involved, the more interested I became. I also got a lot of support from, my MD at the time, Mr. Arnold Ekpe, who operated a truly open door policy and allowed people to go within the system. Then when I moved to MTN, because I was very careful about the choice of companies that I got several offers, and at the back of my mind was always, I want to be in an environment that sees the importance of good governance. So I never really thought about, how much money will I be paid? That really wasn't always a priority for me. We all need money, no doubt about it. But I was careful because as you grow in your career, your name and your reputation become very crucial assets that you must preserve.
Yes.
And so I was very careful to navigate where to go and where not to go, despite the very mouth-watering perks that were offered. And so when MTN came calling, I was, from the antecedents of the company, I knew this was a place that would value good governance. And so I took that jump. So at MTN, I worked with people like Wale Goodluck and a series of managing directors from Ahmad Farouk, Mikey Oki, and my current CEO. And the chairman, our pioneer chairman, Dr. Pascal Dozier, and our current chairman, Dr. Ernest Ndukwe, have been extremely supportive. And when you work with gentlemen who are champions of good governance and who have demonstrated it, you cannot but be humbled by the opportunity. And when you're in an environment where you're allowed to thrive and where your voice is heard and respected, that for me confirms that I didn't make a mistake by coming to this organization. And you're able to contribute to the growth of the organization as it evolved over the years. But I must mention that beyond Professor Kabwe, my other mentor, the gentleman called Mr. Dominoyo, who was executive vice chairman of ExxonMobil. And the reason why I chose him was I needed someone who could give me unbiased, objective career advisory. And I'm mentioning these names because you have to be very deliberate about choosing your mentors. And he has helped me think through certain aspects of my career. He used to be executive director, human resources at ExxonMobil before he became executive vice chairman and retired more recently. Helped me put a lot of things in perspective. You can get from someone who is in-house and closer to that support. So in terms of mentors, those were my two key mentors. I've added a third, who also exited from one of the big four consulting firms, and collectively, they are my board of advisors.
Wow, that's good to hear. Okay, well, let's go a little into knowing how you are able to navigate these things. For company secretaries, when we hear the word stakeholders is everything in company secretaryship. As a company secretary, the stakeholder, the board, the shareholders, every other person that is affected particularly in your case now, it's not just one organization, you interface in so many others. So how are you able to build and maintain these relationships, apart from avoiding conflict, but having them work with ease and not having any issues and helping you grow as well? Because we need to understand how you get across the stakeholders all over your work interest, and you are still moving on unscattered. No, no, nothing bad have happened about it. How were you able to do that? Let us into that secret and skill. How you navigate through stakeholders all over.
That's an interesting question. Every day we are presented with opportunities to, and part of it is the challenges that life throws our way. Whether in the workplace, whether in your personal life, God didn't promise us a day filled with roses and bliss. Otherwise, we would even be bored and not challenged. One thing about navigating is you need people around you. You need your team. You need to also empower the people who work with you. You need to be in an environment where you are empowered. If you read the codes of corporate governance, it says that the company secretary must be sufficiently empowered. So if I translate that, no matter irrespective of your role as a chartered secretary, if you are not sufficiently empowered, that is already a disadvantage because you cannot navigate the various things you have to do in your day-to-day and both strategic and operational roles. You also need to learn to build relationships. Don't seek to build when something happens, because already then you have a big elephant that you need to deal with. Be proactive in building your relationships, whether they're with regulators, whether they're with your board, whether they're with your colleagues. Be very proactive and deliberate in building those relationships, because you never know when you will need them. And I always tell myself, if I don't have first-hand knowledge of an issue, I will definitely know someone who knows about that, or someone who knows about it. And that's what it is about building your network. Don't be afraid to speak up. I tell myself, if I'm sitting at an airport, I speak to the person sitting next to me. I don't know who he is. I don't know how that person may help me 2 years down the line. And that is how relationships are built. In the course of my career, I was also opportuned, and just to give an illustration about how these things help you, I was opportuned to be invited to join several committees that develop the codes of corporate governance that we use today, specifically the SEC code, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance as well. And in that committee, I met a lot of regulators who also we deal with. And because it wasn't at a time where I needed something from them, we could establish very warm and cordial relationships. And even though at the time MTN was not a public company, I kept in touch with those individuals, and that relationship has helped. So don't look at regulators as your enemies. They are stakeholders. Don't look at anyone as an adversary. Look at them as stakeholders, whether you're shareholders. I engage minority shareholders from time to time because they're human. It is their company. They do not want they want their company to continue to be a going concern. It is not in their best interest for their company not to be a going concern. So when you see stakeholders in that light, that everyone wants the best interest of the company, whether they're your colleagues, whether they're your line managers, whether they're your direct reports, whether they are shareholders, whether they are colleagues. And, ICSAN provides us that opportunity to also build those relationships. So we must deliberately take advantage of them.
Okay, thank you very much, ma. That advice is invaluable. Building relationships, making hay while the sun shines. Thank you very much, ma, for that. So let's get to this program. Is about letting people, younger people in the profession, know how most of you made it and are able to keep it up there. What advice will you give to some of us who are starting as company secretary in terms of particular skill and experience that they will require and prioritize to be able to grow and rise to such level that you are holding and forward?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost is to, like you aptly mentioned, is to acquire the requisite skills and knowledge. And the Institute provides that channel to do so, provides a platform where you can equip yourself with those essential skills and information and building blocks of expertise that you will require. And our people shouldn't just think that being a chartered secretary limits you to being a company secretary. When I was talking about myself, I mentioned that I sit on certain boards, and these boards are not related to my profession. I sit on the board of a university. I sit on the board of an agro service company. So it gives you a wide open slate to pursue the things that interest you. We have members of our institute who are CEOs of various organizations, and what our training does is that it strengthens you and empowers you and gives you that comfort and confidence to know that I can conquer all these things. I don't necessarily have to be within my comfort zone. So number one, register and become a member of the Institute. That way you will get the necessary, you will equip yourself with the necessary skills. Number two would be determine who you want to be and where you want to be. Career decisions have to be very deliberate, just like other life decisions. Your career is a very important aspect of your life cycle. Absolutely. And number three is about building relationships. We've talked about that.
Yes.
You have to grow your relationships from the moment you decide to build a career. In fact, even before then, when you're in school, build relationships. You never know where you will meet them, where you will meet your former schoolmates. In your social environment, build relationships. Wherever you find yourself, it's an opportunity to grow your network. If you want to do something, write down the names of 10 people you know. Those 10 people will know another 10 people, and that's how you expand your network. So it's very important. Number four, which also adds to I link it to number two, about choosing who you want to be, is about integrity. You have to, there are certain things that in your career when you're young, you will feel that people will ask you to do. You have to be able to say no if that thing is not, you do not consider it right. It's difficult because people usually ask me, oh, but I need the job, I need the money. It's not everything that you need. They may look as if it's a very consequential at that time, but your reputation is more consequential. Once you've set you've formed a view about, a perception about your character, that there are certain things, don't ask this person to do. Over time, people will just tell you, if it's this matter, please don't even discuss it with this individual. And you have to start early to build that reputation.
Yes,
and not wait until if you don't start early, it will not change when you become more influential.
Yes.
So start early to build that reputation that there are certain things that are no with you. And so integrity is very important. Those in marketing will tell you that the power of perception. And when you look at social media influencers, that's what they have. How are they perceived? We don't know them. We don't know these people really, but they are absolutely, they influence opinion. So you too must be able to influence the perception about yourself, who you are. That's why I linked it to number 2. And it also talks about your faith. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whatever your faith, our faiths encourage us to do what is right. And we must, with our careers, it doesn't exclude our careers. We must do what is right at any time. And your stakeholders will respect you. That's who you are. They will respect you and your opinion when they know that your word is your bond. So I wouldn't, with all that, I believe one can build your career progressively and use those as building blocks as well.
Wow, this invaluable. You have almost answered the next question I wanted to ask, but I will mention it while I ask the one I'm supposed to ask now. I needed to know, you've told us how younger secretaries can grow. I needed to know how you're able to hold sway, how you're able to maintain the same thing at the top level that you are now in terms of tips that other professionals who are growing should learn so that when they get there, they won't miss it. I've gotten most of them already. So I will now ask the right question now. Permit me for asking this particular question. As a successful female role model in corporate governance, what role do you see women, particularly the younger ones who we are looking at in this interview, play in CG? And the female chartered secretary, how does she leverage to be able to get to the top, even in this profession that we are in? They look onto people like you at the top, and they want to know, how do I get there? Particularly the female folks, most of them. How do you respond to that, man?
That's a huge question, but I'll attempt to answer it as best as I can, and hopefully in a helpful manner. So for me, one of the opportunities that came my way and I took, although I felt it was above my capacity at that time. And that's the beauty, because these opportunities create learning opportunities for you. I constantly, even today, look for opportunities to learn more and be a lot more strategic now. So one of the opportunities, and this came at the time where various regulators were developing codes, was actually being part of those committees. And I saw them as learning opportunities. My company was in the private sector. And this is why, again, being deliberate about your choices of employment, if you decide to be in paid employment. Although the company at the time was still a private company, they gave me the opportunity to go and join these committees, because if they didn't, then I wouldn't have been able to. For me, it was, and this is to your question about what role can people play. I was very passionate at being part of policies that would impact us as chartered secretaries. And so being part of those committees gave me the opportunity to contribute and make inputs to things that we as chartered secretaries would have to implement and advise our companies or clients on how to implement them. So being part of that process was very crucial and strategic, in my opinion. And so also making sure that chartered secretaries were empowered through those policies, through those codes, was very important. Otherwise, we might have gotten the short end of the stick. So doing that and taking advantage of those opportunities, learning from the chairman and members of those committees, working closely with them, learning about getting that exposure to other jurisdictions. I mean, if you look at the scope of global corporate governance, the King 4 is one of those that is really, really amplified across the globe, beyond Africa. So being part of that process also gave me the opportunity to even meet Professor Mervyn King, speak to him one-on-one, speak to other key players in other jurisdictions, so that my input, meeting those within the Nigerian landscape, both public sector, not-for-profit, private sector, that was an excellent learning opportunity. So my advice to those who are beyond mid-level and still climbing, and whether you're at the top, I really never say top of your career, because they'll always expand those opportunities. You must never see the ceiling. You must continue to go to climb higher, look for other opportunities.
When you get there, it doesn't look like top again. Look as if there is more up.
Precisely. There's always more above you. That's the way I look at it.
Yes.
There are always opportunities you should explore above you. And so it's constant learning. You have to learn, you have to unlearn certain things, you have to relearn, even those that you consider are those young ones. I mean, the millennials, there's so much to learn from them. So I do sometimes what people consider to be, I've forgotten the word now, and it will come to me, where you actually look for those young people to actually mentor you, if I can put it that way. Reverse mentoring, that's what it's called. And so there's so much to learn, because we're living in a world that we didn't grow up in. And it is their world. So when I look at millennials, we're living in a place where a lot of things are alien to those of us who grew up in the 60s, 70s, even 80s. So to learn to live in tomorrow's world, you must consult them. That's part of your relationship building. So I have a lot of young practitioners, a lot of young chartered secretaries that I reach out to from time to time to say, what do you think about this? And that also helps them build confidence as well. So when you think that you've peaked at your career, or you're at the plateau of your career, I can tell you there's still a lot of opportunities, and you have to keep learning, learn about the world. Technology is here. And today, the Lagos State chapter was doing something on AI, which I joined. Workplace, the workplace of today is different from pre-COVID workplace. So there's so many things, the dynamisms, the opportunities across sectors. And of course, as a woman in the workplace, women, we balance so many things. We have to balance our career. We have to balance the home front. You have to balance family, friends, you name it. And I always tell myself, you have to pick and choose what you can do. Sometimes, women, we're exceptional when it comes to multitasking. I always tell myself, which ball can I drop and pick up later? Which ball, if I drop, will shatter, and so there's no opportunity to pick up late subsequently. It just the go, and that guides me. At some point, I've made career changes to accommodate my family, depending on where my children were at the stage, to accommodate a lot of things. So you have to look at your specific circumstances and take those decisions. But I can tell you the power of having a very supportive spouse, and the power of also working, making sure that you don't deprioritize your family because they support you. So I was very deliberate to work to look for a company that would support. I could go off on time to spend midterm with my children. I could, take time off, and And in my current organization, your leave time is yours. It's almost like your salary. So when you apply for leave, nobody can tell you no, except there is an extreme business emergency, because that is your time. So you have to, as a woman, look for places that are friendly to us. If you're at the point where you are, still reproducing, you have to look for a place that has family-friendly policies such as maternity leave and those other things that will accommodate you. And as a woman, don't be comfortable. Don't think they are comfort zones. Explore as much as you can. You are a whole being. You're human to begin with. You are capable. Don't second guess yourself. Don't doubt your competencies. At MTN, we always say doing doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. It means that you learn from your mistakes. So keep doing. Mistakes are part of the experience that you will garner as you navigate your career.
Thank you very much. It's enough food for us to consume. But listening to you all this while, to tell you the truth, everything looks rosy and beautiful. Now, looking back on this your unique, beautiful career journey from entry level to this level now, is there anything you would have done differently? How would you advise people who are at this early stage based on what you think was something you could have done rightly so that they don't make that mistake or whatever as they progress? So tell us, looking back now, what are the things you would have done differently? I don't know, that would have maybe fastened or hastened your success story or whatever, so that we can learn as we journey us.
I think there's something that I always, it's not a regret, but it's something I would have, if there was a way to turn back the clock, I would have done. And that is to explore opportunities that seem daunting at the time. And this could mean going to work in a different jurisdiction, because you learn a lot that way. So I wish I had taken advantage of those opportunities that were outside the immediate scope of my environment and my calling. So because ultimately, as you grow, those experiences are honestly invaluable. I would say to the young Chartered Secretary, please do not feel constrained by where you are. Explore, do what you do, sit down, look at your career, determine this is where you want to go. Any opportunity that you feel will complement that and will support you in that career aspiration, please explore. Have no comfort zones whatsoever. That's the key advice I would give.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you very much, man. One thing I took that you said there is no top this time around. You always see them as opportunities for further growth. So fast forward to 10 years to come, where do we see Mrs. Uto Ukpanah the next 10 years? As a Chartered Secretary, as a person, as a corporate expert, where do we see you in the next 10 years?
Interesting. Just thinking back, when I was asked to chair the building committee, I was like, but I don't know anything about building. So what will I do? But, thankfully, we have exceptional members of that committee. And we also have our past president, Akin Oguniro, who is a doyen in the construction and real estate sector. So when you ask me that question, it's also about looking at what do I want to be. I think for me, the next couple of years, decade or so, will be focused on service. And whether it is on a global stage, whether it's at a national stage, irrespective of what the stage is, I want to focus more on opportunities to serve at different levels, whatever those opportunities might be. I don't have a crystal ball. I think it's only God that can answer that question. But what I will say is that the next decade, the opportunities that I have proposed for myself will be more about service to our institute, service to humankind, and especially roles that enable me to also have input into governance would be those that I will be interested in pursuing.
Oh, I say a big amen to that, and
Amen.
I'm sure it. Thank you very much, Mrs. Uto Ukpanah. On behalf of the chairman of the Rivers State Chapter of ICSAN, the leadership of members, we want to express our heartfelt gratitude for the wealth of experience you have donated for us free of charge, and particularly overshoot the time we gave you. We are very thankful. This interview will remain for posterity, not just in Rivers State Chapter, but all over. We are very grateful for this. I want to wish you much more than you even wish yourself, because God says he will do for us exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask or think. So we know that what he has in store for you, you can't even envisage it now as it is. And so the chapter prays that you get much more than you desire in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. And please extend my warm appreciation to the chapter and to you especially for reaching out for me, to me. I also want to wish all our members spread across, whether they're in Nigeria, whether they're in the diaspora, a very wonderful, wonderful time and all the best in their respective careers. Thank you very much. And thank you for your prayers.
Yes, thank you very much. We are glad.